and are subscribed to our market notices and daily briefings. We do encourage you as well to keep up with these blogs. They really highlight interesting ISO operations news and industry trends that we are finding is very helpful for those keeping up. And you can see the links right there where to find those. It's on the kaiso.com about section on our website. And as most know, the objective for these calls are to enable dialogue on the implementation planning and performance issues, such as reviewing key market performance topics, sharing release updates, providing initiative updates and information to support participants in their resource planning, as well as to, of course, focus on clarifying timelines and discussing any external impacts, as well as policy discussions that should occur during our stakeholder process.
Your line is now unmuted.
I'm sorry, operator. Are we now just unmute just now? I thought it was unmuted the entire time. Sorry about that, folks.
It has been unmuted the entire time.
Okay, I heard something on my end. Sorry about that, everybody. So the agenda, as you can see, as is the usual, is to discuss an update on our market performance, presented by Abhishek Handuwale, Guillermo Batista, Rahul Kalaskar, and Amber Motley from our Market Analysis and Forecasting Group. And then we'll have a policy update provided by Brad Cooper from our Policy Group. And then finally, we'll conclude with our release update provided by Trang Vo. As a reminder, of course, as most know, this call is recorded for stakeholder convenience, allowing those who are unable to attend to listen to the recordings after the meetings. These recordings will be publicly available on the webpage for a limited time following the meetings, and we ask that any related transcriptions or recordings not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And lastly, if you have a question, we ask that you please raise your hand virtually by pressing the raise hand icon. And for those that dialed in by phone only, then you would have to push #2 to enter the queue. And we request that everybody state your name and the company that you represent. And with that, I will hand it over to Guillermo.
Thank you, Jimmy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. And I just want to give you some context of the expectation for this discussion this morning. We just have a couple of sessions in the recent past, as early as this week, regarding specific performance for the summer conditions. And there were a few questions in the last call on Tuesday, and we tried to accommodate some of that. Unfortunately, the time is just too short to be able to have the confidence of developing the metric that could be needed to address the comments and requests from the last call on Tuesday. So because of that, we have not included any specific item to address the comments and requests from last Tuesday for the July performance report. One of them was, for instance, the prices at which the batteries were clearing during the critical days where we imposed the minimum state of charge constraint. So we will seek an avenue to provide that information in the near future. Now, in terms of the material that is for the session this morning, we have the typical structure of the deck. We have a few items that we want to explicitly cover. These are the hot topics, and we are going to go through the CRR update, through the batteries, and also the sufficiency test. The subsequent section is the standard metrics that we have for the MPPF. We do not expect to cover those explicitly. If you have any questions for that part of the material, we may see we can answer those. And then we're just going to jump forward to the section of the forecasting. And as I indicated, we already covered a lot of the material for the summer performance through the monthly discussions. And this is complemental to that discussion. If you have any questions, I would suggest that you hold a little bit the questions until the specific topic is covered, so that we can have a good discussion. With that, I will pass it to Abhishek, who is going to cover the section for CRRs.
Thanks, Guillermo. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Abhishek Hundiwale from Market Analysis. We have an update on the CRR performance. Basically using the same metrics that we have been reporting. These are just the updates from the last MPPF. The first slide in this, it shows the CRR settlements by month. As expected, during the summer months, we saw an increase in the CRR notional revenue, as shown in the green bar, given the increase in congestion during the summer months. In the month of July, there were a couple of 500 kV lines that were derated, and due to that derate, there would be an impact on the CRR deficit, and hence you would see an increase in the CRR deficit for the month of July. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this slide shows basically the difference between the CRR 1B settlement that is with pro rata funding and as compared to the no pro rata funding that we had previously. So this shows that the CRR settlement for the month of July would have largely been in deficit for the no pro rata funding that is before the implementation of CRR 1B. Due to the CRR 1B settlements, we see that the allocation to measure demand is in positive, and that itself is a significant improvement to the CRR 1B initiative. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this slide, it gives you the auction efficiency, and it shows that the auction efficiency ratio has decreased below 100% as we come into the summer months, and this has been largely a trend that we have seen similar to what we have seen previously in the other months as well, the previous years. That during the summer months it decreases during the summer months, and then in the other winter months it goes a little bit higher. Can you go to the next slide, please? So changing topics a little bit on this, we identified a software issue that impacted the day-ahead market and the settlement of the CRR for the period of January 15, 2021 to January 25, 2021. This issue was related to the shift factors missing just for the specific location of Valuvadi node. Due to this missing shift factors, the marginal congestion component, that is the MCC, was missing for this particular node, and due to that, this issue basically lasted for 10 days from 15 to 25th, and it was fixed in production for the trade date of January 26, 2021. Since we identified this issue outside the price correction window, we could not implement a price correction process for this particular issue. We did an approximate CRR impact assessment, that is back of the envelope calculation, and it was about $318,000 for all the 10 trade dates that we've mentioned in this combined. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so this shows the CRR impact assessment by the trade date, as we've seen that the total of 318.
Right. Hey, sorry, Rahul. Operator, I think we're having difficulty. Some folks are saying they're not seeing the slides change. I'm not sure if it's something on my end or another technical issue.
Jimmy, can we get confirmation from other participants to see if they are able to see the slides progressing, or is just one participant?
I'm getting a couple of messages from folks they're not seeing the slide progress. I don't know, operator. Well, actually, now I'm seeing messages that everyone can see the slides. So for folks that can't see the slides progress, I'm not sure, operator, if you have any suggestions for how the settings might work in the WebEx.
The WebEx is coming through clearly.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure, folks. Sorry for any difficulty, but it looks like, yeah, I'm getting messages that folks can see the slides, so I don't want to interrupt any further. So go ahead, Rahul.
Okay, so let's continue. So this slide basically shows the CRR impact assessment by trade date. It shows that the most significant impact was on January 15th, and definitely, I mean, it subsides afterwards. It shows for all the 10 trade dates that it was the biggest impact was for one trade date, that is January 15th. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so this gives you a different variation of the CRR impact assessment that we did. This gives you by the scheduling coordinator, and it shows that there are multiple SCs that have been impacted by this issue, and with one SC being the most, with one SC seeing the largest impact, while all others have had relatively low impact as compared to the one SC that had a significant impact. So I just wanted to ask if there are any questions for whatever we've covered on the CRR or on this issue.
Thanks, Abhishek. As a reminder, folks, please raise your hand virtually unless you dialed in only by phone, in which case you'd have to push #2. I'll give Marco some time.
We have no questions at this time.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. Over to Rahul.
Yeah, and sorry, before we go into Rahul, let me give more context on this. The first item and the main reason for which we are bringing this item is a retrospective issue that we had that we corrected. The criticality for the discussion is that obviously that 10-day period fell outside the price correction window, and therefore we couldn't correct for that issue. The assessment that we have done is a counterfactual analysis if the right information is in the system and we properly set the CRR settlements, what the difference would have been. And you can see that there is an impact on either side of the equation. There are participants that were undercharged or overcharged. And this is part of the market issues process that we have. We have defined this in the business practice manual that when we have such type of issue, first we have to be transparent about this and bring it to the market so that they are aware. Now, there is a decision point that we have to take, and this is where it's subject to more consideration. In general, we consider that a market issue has to be discussed with participants. We need to receive feedback from participants, and also we have to take into account how feasible it is for us to correct that issue. In this case, we are limited by the time window of the tariff to do price corrections. It's outside that window. The second factor that we consider is how targeted that issue impacted some participants. If the impact is across the entire market, maybe a different consideration if the issue is impacting specifically one or a very few set of participants. I think it would be important to create expectation that at this point we haven't made that decision. If we were able to move forward and try to address this issue, the only mechanism that we have is to seek a tariff waiver to be able to do a price correction way after the fact, and that would require approval from FERC. That would be one pathway. The other pathway, naturally, is just communicate the issue, the impact assessment, and given the fact that it's outside the normal process, we just leave it there and move on. If obviously there are some CRR participants that are going to be impacted in either direction, overcharge or undercharge with a change, there is an interest from them to this specific issue. So I would appreciate if any participant, and it doesn't have to be right now here, we can receive any written comments. about what they think about this issue, so that we can have some feedback from the CRR community about this issue, and that can help us to guide in the conclusion of dealing with this specific market issue.
Thanks a lot, Guillermo. And I just want to point out as well, this deck was slightly updated to include more recent months, as folks have noticed, which we'll post, of course, right after the meeting. So,
okay, I think we have one question in the chat, and let me see. What was the process error that allowed the Palo Verde shift factors to become missing? Well, I don't want to go into much technicalities, but it was not a process. It was a logic in the functionality of the market application. When I refer to process, I mean business processes run by the ISO against or different to internal logic in the market applications. This was more about internal logic in the market application, and that was triggered because there was a change, an update to the logic of the market application, unrelated to a specific shift factor, but it was a change that happened in the market application for that day, and the byproduct of that was this issue introduced in the missing shift factor.
Thanks a lot, Guillermo. Before we move on, just one last pause on this for any questions before the next section.
I see one hand raised, Jimmy.
It looks like we do have a question in the queue, Marco. I'll give Marco some time to open him up, assuming he's still in the queue. I'm getting some strange feedback, Marco. I don't know if that's participant's line or mine. All right.
That is the caller's line.
Okay, I think that's Seth Cochran who had his hand up. And Seth, I'm not sure if you're having difficulty, but yeah, we couldn't hear you come through just.
Are you able to hear me now?
Hey, yes. Hey, Seth.
I'm sorry. Guillermo, I had a question about this. I kind of caught you right in the middle of this update. Is Kaiso going to perform price corrections for this?
At this stage, we're still exploring the issue, Seth. I was referring to the standard process that we have to assess this type of market issues, and they are defined in the BPM for market operations. And there are basically 2-3 conditions that we assess to make that determination. One is administratively whether it's feasible to implement that correction. Second, the magnitude and the impact of the issue, whether it impacted very targetedly a few participants versus is an issue spread across the market. And as I indicated earlier, right now through the standard process, we cannot do a price correction because we're outside the window of the price correction. And the only pathway for us to implement a change after the fact outside the window would be through a tariff waiver. And we have done it once in the past, a few years ago. This is the main element that we have to consider. And we are going through the process, and one of the first steps is to bring the transparency to the market of this issue so that we can hear feedback from participants. And once we go through that stage, I think we will go through the assessment, and we will communicate on what is our stand on this market issue.
Yeah, okay. I don't know who all these scheduling coordinators are, but I guess the issue is you have a concentration on that scheduling coordinator 7 that sort of presents an issue, that the distribution of the correction wasn't more uniform. So yeah, it seems like a tough question.
Yeah. And we would take an opportunity to receive any feedback from participants. And once we get that, I think we are going to have at least with some sense of where participants stand on this, and we will communicate where we stand on this after we have done that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Do you have any
Operator, seeing no more questions, just want to confirm on your end.
We have no questions at this time.
Great, thanks. Thanks a lot, Abhishek and Guillermo. And next section, folks.
Okay, let me cover this quickly. I think this is just an update to true up the trend up to the summer months. And typically we receive this type of questions as to how expensive or how high the costs have been once we go into the summer events. And these are a standard metric that we have tracked over time, and we refer to the overall wholesale cost, effectively how much it costs to transact the energy through the CAISO market. And there are different components that make up this overall cost. Naturally, we have the costs coming from the different markets, the day ahead, the real time, either it's for energy or for ancillary services. We have this uplift cost that includes the bid cost recovery, the payments to the RMR units, even the GMC, that is the fee for participation in the markets. The next few slides is just different angles of the same cost, how to organize it based on the market, based on the time, and we can just quickly go through these ones. And next slide, please. This is the total cost over time for the last 3.5 years. And I think it's important to put in context a few years in the past because that gives you a real sense of the seasonality of the conditions. Naturally, the costs are going to increase in the summer months because of two factors. The costs are derived based on the energy transacted and also the prices. And in the summer, it happens that we transact the most of the energy because we have the highest load of the year, and typically because we are running into tighter summer conditions, prices tend to rise. So you have higher prices for settling higher energy transacted in the system. So it's natural to expect that we are going to have an increase in the summer months. And you can see that that also depends a lot on the weather conditions, right? You have a mild summer like 2019, the cost may not be dramatically higher than other quarters for the year. You may recall 2018, 2017 indeed, and 2020 last year were relatively expensive, and that shows that increasing trend for the quarter three. In this year, for instance, you can see that Q1 is relatively high for the time of the year, and a main driver for that was related to the winter conditions that we observed in February, mid-February, when we have effectively the gas conditions pushing prices quite high. And naturally, there is this correlation between gas prices, dynamics, and the electric prices. We still have a meaningful fleet of gas resources that typically may be the marginal resources and therefore are going to set the overall price for energy. So dynamics of the gas market naturally will transpire into the electric prices and is going to be priced accordingly. And that is one of the drivers for having this higher cost in February and in general for the quarter one of 2021. We indeed reported that earlier in these MPPFs when we have that material for the month of February. Next slide, please. This is a different comparison, just comparing month to month for the last 3.5 years. And naturally, you can see the trend. It's concentrated mostly in the summer months, anywhere between June, July, August. Sometimes we get this tail of the summer conditions in the early September, like what we just experienced yesterday and today. And that may trend to have higher costs even for some months for some years in September. Typically, we're going to see low cost in the shoulder months in the springtime, somewhere in March, April, May, when we have plenty of solar production, plenty of renewable or near zero marginal production. We also have, relatively speaking, low levels of load, And this is the perfect combination to have a relatively low cost for the wholesale market. Next slide, please. This is the breakdown when we compare what share belongs to the day-ahead market versus the real-time market versus the uplift versus AES. And over 90% is going to be transacted from the day-ahead market. This is the market where the majority of the transactions are liquidated, are settled, and that is one of the criticalities to ensure that we have a robust day-ahead solution, because we know the implications are largely defined in the day-ahead market. Next slide, please. This is a different variation, just to give you a sense. Naturally, one of the factors driving the cost is going to be the amount of energy transacted, and this is just an average of the demand that cleared for the corresponding month. And you can see a strong correlation between the level of the total cost against the energy transacted. Next slide, please. If we want to refer to this overall cost, including the effect of the volume of the energy transacted, we can come with an average cost that is no more than the total cost divided by the total energy transacted. And that gives you a more practical feeling of how expensive has been to transact energy through the market. And the trend remains the same. It's just the magnitude, the reference that changes, because in this case, we're talking about dollars per megawatt hour. And in the shoulder months, the spring months, you can see that we have on average prices of $20, $30, and they increase dramatically through the summer. In some cases, may reach on average the upper $80 per megawatt hour. For the month of July, we are close to $80 per megawatt hour. And keep in mind, this data is quite dynamic. Settlement data is refreshed as we go through each of the corresponding cycles of the settlements, and therefore this data, at least for the most recent months, is going to change. Not dramatically, but expect to see some changes. So please be mindful that this is preliminary information, at least for the most recent months. Next slide. And if you really want to see a more granular view over time, at least for 2021, this illustrates how the dynamics over time has been. And this is more granular. This is by day, effectively. And you can see the effect that it has in February when we have the gas conditions. There were 2-3 days around February 15 or so in which gas prices indeed exceeded the $100 per MMBTU, and correspondingly the cost of the CAISO market reflected that high value for the gas energy. As we go into the summer, you see less spiky conditions, but they are more steady. They are trending higher and more steady, and that altogether comes with a higher volume overall for the summer months. And that is somehow expected. Any other time, I would say a typical reference of a daily cost for the wholesale market is anywhere between 20 to 30 million. That would be the typical daily cost. In some extreme cases like February, you can see that we have easily a tenfold increase for one single day. As we move into the summer, this daily cost will go easily over the $50 million per day. Next slide, please. Okay, now I will pass it to Rahul to cover the batteries and the resource efficiency test. Jimmy, before we do that, let's see if we have any questions so far.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Guillermo. I do notice a chat question, but before we move on to the chat, just want to confirm with Marco if there's any hands raised, which I don't see on my end.
We have no questions at this time.
All right, thanks so much. We do have one chat question from Dan Williams, I believe, from CES, asking, has the CAISO noticed any changes in how demand is being bid or scheduled in the day-ahead market for summer 2021 versus August/September 2020?
Yes, we track that. We haven't reported explicitly or publicly that trend. I think that was a topic of discussion back in the assessment that we did for the summer 2020. And I believe the question is really signaling about the under-scheduling of demand in the CAISO market. Just to put context to this, the issue that we have back in the summer 2020 was that in addition to all the dynamics that we were dealing with through the conditions of the system, one of the items that we were pointing out was the systemic under-scheduling of demand in the day-ahead market from low-serving entities. And we did some analysis. We had some follow-ups with the low-serving entities. And the information that we gained and that we eventually made publicly available through the reports is that at the end of the day, we have to recognize that getting the right load forecast on which the participants can build in the strategy to bidding up the demand in the market, it's a challenging business. Given the conditions of the COVID-19, the changing of patterns, the weather conditions, that is an ongoing challenge no matter who is doing the forecast. That naturally creates a lot of complexities and limitations of how precisely the demand can be scheduled in the day-ahead market. That was one of the findings that we realized. And I would say we see similar trends in the summer 2021 in comparison to 2020. And it's just a reflection of these challenges to get a good load forecast, even in the day-ahead time frame, when we know that the realities of the forecasting going from the day ahead to the real time can be quite challenging when you have the temperatures moving around. So I would say that from the analysis that we have done, the monitoring that we have done, we haven't seen any concerning trend at this point of how the demand is bidding in the day ahead market. And let me just add one more point because I want to make sure the picture is complete here. One of the differences that we have between the summer 2020 and this summer 2021 was precisely the changes of practice that we implemented on September 5th. You may recall that during the summer 2020, at some point, we suspended convergence bids and the concept of exports being awarded based on capacity that was not physically sustainable once we moved into the reliability run of the market. With the changes that we implemented on September 5th, that issue largely is addressed because obviously the convergence bids can play a role here to converge the markets and the under-scheduling of the demand. And once we have the changes of the reference of the ROC process of how to deal with the exports, that largely addressed the concern. So I think we should expect that under-scheduling, over-scheduling may happen beyond just simple strategy, but because of the challenging conditions to get a right forecast. And the mechanisms in the market are there to ensure that this dynamic can be managed through other market design components like convergence bid participation. Do we have any other questions, Jimmy?
Guillermo, I do see another question in the chat. Sorry, my connection's going in and out, folks. Okay, I can see the question asking from C.D. McClan from CEC regarding the CAISO Oasis asking users can access the day-ahead market summary report to obtain daily energy cleared in megawatt hours. Kaisho should consider making energy cleared information available for every interval cleared by every market operated. So thanks so much for that feedback. We'll definitely take that into account. And I don't see any more questions in the queue, so I just want to confirm with you, Marco, before I move on. All right, great. Hearing none. Moving on to batteries.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Guillermo. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so before I go into the chart that's presented here, in this section we are providing an overview of what is the state of storage participation in the ISO market. And as you have observed in our previous presentations and also in our summer reports, we were expecting a steady increase in penetration of storage resource. So just a background for everyone, how storage resources are different. Most storage resources in the ISO market have a 4-hour storage capacity, and storage resources have an ability of shifting power across the hours. And in the ISO market, we have now seen a trend for a few years that we have abundance of solar in the afternoon hours, and then there is a steep ramp requirement for the net load peak. And it was envisioned that storage resources would have the ability to shift the power from the solar hours and help meet the demand during the net load peak. In order to do so, the storage resources are expected to charge during the time when the energy prices are relatively lower, and discharge during the period when the energy prices are higher. So, based on this background, I would like to make some comments on what you're seeing in this chart. This chart is showing you the hourly profile of the state of the charge for storage resources in the day-ahead market. So what we can see from this chart is several trends. First, we have seen a significant increase in the storage resource participation in the summer months of June, July, and August. And mainly August has been the time where we have seen the maximum participation from storage resource so far. And we have seen two things. First, there is a significant increase in the number of resources, storage resources that are participating in the ISO market. And not only that, we are also seeing the size. The new storage resources have significantly higher capacity than what we had, 6 months ago. So you can see in March and April timeframe, the storage resources maximum stored charge in the day ahead was somewhere, would reach as high as 1,000. But as we approach August, you can see that the average stored charge between the hours of 13 through 17 reached above 5,000. So which is a significant increase from the last few months. And we also see this trend confirm, what was our original hypothesis that yes, storage will have the ability to charge during the solar hours and then gradually discharge and help meet the net load peak And this is what we are seeing, that as you move on from our ending 18 through 22, the storage charge is gradually reducing. And as it's gradually reducing, it's helped the system meet the net load peak. Let me move on to the next slide, Jimmy. Okay, so this is a very similar trend to what we saw in the previous chart. In this chart, we have the state of charge for the storage resource in the real time as compared to the day ahead. And, we see pretty much similar trend that in the real-time market, if you look at focus on mainly on August, the average state of charge between our ending 13 and 17 is somewhere around 5,000 megawatt hours. Just, few differences that we observe from the day ahead is, for example, in the month of July, we are seeing a much higher state of charge during the solar hours in real time than what we saw in day ahead. And those differences are mainly related to participation from a handful of resources, which at times were only participating in the real-time market, but chose not to participate in day ahead. And what I mean by that is, it's not they did not submit bids. It's just the nature of their bids did not result in a market award. So they were available in the day ahead at times, but it was just not economical to give them an award. Whereas once they moved to real time, their bidding pattern was different, and as a result, they did receive market award, and then they were participating in the market, but only in real time. Other pattern is, in day ahead, the maximum state of charge in July was much lower than 5,000, but in real time in July, you can see on some days, the state of charge exceeds the 5,000 mark. Similarly, some other observation is there is a lot more variability in the state of charge in the real time compared to day ahead. So what I mean by that is, if you look at our endings 1 through 9 in August, in the real time, the spread around the average or the box is much longer compared to the day ahead. So essentially, you can see that, there are other aspects of storage that come in play in real time when the storage resources are also providing regulation. So when they provide regulation, it's possible that, their state of charge would be either higher or lower than the day ahead, just because, the state of charge comes in play whenever storage resource is providing regulation services. So I think those were some of the key observations from these two charts. We do realize that there is a typo on the heading for this page. The title should end with, in line with the day ahead state of charge and not stage of charge. So we will take that into account and make sure we will update this slide after we finish today's presentation. Jimmy, can we move to the next slide? Okay, so the next two slides are similar in nature from the first two for the battery resources, in the sense that, as I mentioned, in the ISO market, most of the storage resources are 4-hour resources, and essentially they need 4 hours to go from no charge to their full state of charge, and then they would take 4 hours to discharge completely. What you are seeing here in this chart is the amount of energy or the day-ahead energy award for the storage resource. And as we expect, the storage resources are situated to arbitrage the opportunity to buy energy at the lowest price in the day, and then discharge it in the highest price of the day. And historically, based on the duck curve, we expect that the solar output would be highest during the afternoon hours. And during those hours, market prices would generally be lower because of abundance of solar. And that would be an incentive for the storage resources to charge during those hours. So as you can see in this chart, which is very prominent for the months of June through August, that the storage resources are essentially charging from hour ending 8 all the way through hour ending 17, and then predominantly discharging during the hours from 18 through 22. And as I mentioned before, hours ending 18 through 22 is the net load peak, or the time where solar output is gradually reducing. There is a significant need for ramping in those hours, and the storage resources are essentially meeting our objective. And some of the key observation is similar to having the highest state of charge in August. We are seeing that in August the total output from storage resources is exceeding almost 1,000 megawatts in between hour ending 19, 20, and 21, which is a sign that the technology is maturing, and we are seeing a lot more resources participate in the market. Jimmy, can we go to the next slide? So this is the information for the real-time dispatch for storage resources. And as I mentioned in day ahead, similar in real time, the dispatch for storage resources is exceeding 1,000 megawatts in some hours, which is a sign that we have seen a significant increase in volume. Because if you look back only March or April, we had very few hours where the total dispatch exceeds 500 megawatts. So this is a clear sign that storage resources have actively participating in this summer. And as expected, there is a lot more variability in the dispatch for storage resources in real time compared to day ahead. And this is basically an indication that storage resources are not only providing energy but providing ancillary service. And when they're providing ancillary service, they may have to charge or discharge in certain hours in real time in order to make up the lost SOC or the gained SOC from the other services. Let me pause here and see if there are any questions.
Thanks much, Rahul. As a reminder, folks, please push #2 if you've dialed in by phone only. Otherwise, press the raise hand icon. I do see one question came in, so give them time to enter the queue.
Your line is unmuted.
Oh.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, so the graphic showing the negative volume in charging it and positive in discharging. I just want to confirm.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, before we go to the next question, there is a question in the chat. The question is, are most of the resources charging all the way to 100% and discharging to 0%, or they are operating between 20 and 80%. I can say that anecdotally, we have seen the storage resources go all the way up to their full capacity, but I don't have a recollection if they have gone all the way to zero. I believe most storage resources do have the ability to, limit the range for their min and max SOC that can be used, but we really don't have a metric that to answer that question. But I think this is a good question, so we will consider that for future discussion. Jimmy, do you see any other questions?
I have
Thanks,
one more.
Rahul. Yeah. Any other questions in the queue? So
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
yeah.
So those curve for the just previous slide for charging and discharging, are they matching with the duck curve?
Yes, if you look at the trend for both the state of charge and the dispatch, they do align with the duck curve.
Okay. Yeah, I like to see if I can, and I like to see the duck curve is there so that I can see it is exactly matching or there's a slight variation. So that's one comment.
Sure. No, I think that's a good feedback. We will take that into consideration. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. This is, in the last MPPF, we have been providing summaries about how storage resources are participating in ancillary service market. And as we have seen this trend before, we continue to see that storage resources are, still actively continue to participate in providing both regulation and spin. And it appears that, the current approach has been a significant participation in both regulation up and regulation down. And as you can see, for the months of March through May, there is a pretty equal participation in both regulation up and regulation down. And a lot of the results are also driven by what is the total system requirement. Generally, the regulation up and regulation down volume may be much different than, let's say, spin requirement. So I think that's all we have on storage resources. So we can see if there are any questions on storage before I move on to the EIM section.
Thanks, Rahul. Looks like we do have one question in the queue and a couple in the chat. So you first. Okay.
I think there are two questions, and let me read those questions and see if I can the best way to respond. The first question is related to how frequently batteries are being exceptionally dispatched and during which hours. That's a metric that we have tracked internally, but haven't really added that metric to this report. What we can do is see if we can add this to the summer metrics in future, and we will discuss that, once we go over future summer months.
It's really hot right now.
Okay. I think we have some one's line unmuted. Alan, would you like to ask the question?
Hi, yeah, Alan Meck from San Diego Gas and Electric. Back on slide 21, I think it was 21, I just had a little bit of a clarifying question on how the minimum state of charge is working. It was my understanding that this was a very rare thing that was going to be used only when the system was experiencing really tight conditions, and it looks like CAISO's been using some level of minimum state of charge for every single month: March, April, May, June, July, August. So can someone clarify how that's working?
Sure. I think the question that you're asking is about the minimum state of charge constraint that ISO implemented only is for the starting from summer 2021. I don't think the minimum state of charge had any impact to the data that you're seeing on this slide 21. So maybe if I can ask you a clarifying question.
Okay.
Can you restate or let me know, what is there something you say that drives you to think that minimum state of charge is being impacted?
No, I read that as the ISO using the day ahead to direct storage resources to hold a minimum state of charge. I guess it was just a misunderstanding of the label of the graph. Okay, so that makes sense then, because yeah, I was like, why are we having minimum state of charge requirements in March, April, and May? That just struck me as very odd, but okay, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, no problem. And just for everyone's clarification, the minimum state of charge constraint was not, is included in most of the days for this. The minimum state of charge constraint was active only for 3 days in July, and we have a detailed description and analysis in the July monthly report. And we also had the same topic item in one of the slides for the July presentation for the call on Tuesday. Okay, let me move on to next questions. I think we have 2 or 3. So there was a question of how frequently we have exceptional dispatch. We don't have that metric here, but we track internally. We will see for future presentations if we can add that. The next question is, has ISO made any adjustment to dispatch of regulation given the increase in the ramp capability? The ISO has had several discussions about how to manage the regulation for storage resources. I think that's a topic that has been discussed a few times during the storage straw proposal discussions. So, I would defer any questions related to AGC and regulation to those discussions. But I can take this internally and see if we can provide any update if we are making any modification to our AGC algorithm. And I think that's the comment I have regarding the AGC and EMS. We have one more question about the regulation awards. I think, so if I can, Jimmy, if we can go back to I think it's slide 25. So this is not the average value by resource. This metric is slightly different from the last MPPF metric that we had presented. What you see here is the total, if there were, say, 10 resources that participated in regulation market, then we just add up their values for each hour and then take the average for the month. So it's not the average value per resource, but it is the average value of all regulation up and regulation down awards for storage resources. And last question is, does the ISO still utilize RBC band-in dispatching? Regulation fleet, I can't get what exactly does RBC imply in this case. So if the participant would like to, join the line, it will be easier to have that conversation.
Thanks, Rahul. Yeah, if the participant is able to get in the queue by pushing #2, if you dialed in separately or raise your hand virtually, that'd be helpful. If you can elaborate, or if you can elaborate further in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I think we really don't have more details for AGC for this discussion. So I would like to defer that question for future discussion, or see if we can figure out a specific metric from the market that can help answer those questions.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we'll follow up. Thanks, Rahul.
Okay, and I think there was a question from Callie. Callie, I think I can follow up with you offline and maybe provide some more reference to what exactly that means. Okay, let's move on to EIM section.
Sure, I saw one in the queue. It looks like it went down, so. Thanks, Rahul. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, let me go through resource sufficiency test metrics. So just at a very high level, ISO has been presenting a few set of metrics for the resource sufficiency test. So for each trade hour, all EIM entities, including the California ISO, have to pass 2 tests. One is the capacity test, and second is the flexible ramp sufficiency test. There are 2 other tests that I will not go much into detail, the balancing and the feasibility, because they have a little different impact. The 2 key tests for each trade hour for all EIM entities is the bid range capacity test and the flexible ramp sufficiency test. It's critical for EIM entities, including the ISO, to pass these tests, because when you pass those tests, it provides the ability to participate in the EIM using your full ability of your transfers on your interties. And if the EIM entity fails these tests, then essentially you may have a limited ability to participate in the EIM market, because if you fail one of these tests, your transfers are essentially capped to either your base transfers or your EIM transfer from the last 15-minute interval. So with that background, let's go into the first. So here, what we are seeing is the result of the flexible ramp sufficiency tests for all the balancing areas that are part of the ISO market up till August 2021. Some key observation here is, most of the entities tend to have a very high passing rate, and which, exact opposite to that is very low failing rate. However, as we come into summer months, things can get pretty tight, especially if the ramping capability around the evening peak can be a little challenging. So you can see here that there are a couple of EIM entities who had a slight increase in the passing of the flex ramp sufficiency up test. Most of the EIM entities, as you can see, their failure rate is less than 1%. But there are 2 EIM entities that stand out. One of them is SRP. Their passing rate, failure rate is slightly more than 1.5%. And then there is a new EIM entity, the Northwest, and they had a slightly higher failure rate in July. And then you can see that there was an improvement in August where the failure rate reduced to less than 1%. And if you look at California ISO, has generally passed more than 99% of its tests, but there are some challenging hours around the net load peak where the flex ramp sufficiency test, they have some failures for CAISO. The other observation from here is, especially in February, you can see that for one balancing area, the failure rate is around 10%, and that's not a normal expected outcome, but it is related to a specific gas event that happened for 2 or 3 days, where the supply, the bid price for the resources went above the bid cap, and essentially some resources chose not to participate in the market because it was prohibitive based on the bid cap in the ISO market at that time. Jimmy, can we go to the next slide? This chart here shows the metric for the flexible ramp down sufficiency test. And as expected, generally in the summer months, it's relatively easier for most EIM entities to pass the flexible ramp down test. However, we do see that some EIM entities have a slightly higher flexible ramp down failures. And these slightly higher flex ramp down failures are mainly related to the early morning hours when the solar resources are ramping. And if those resources do not have an ability to respond to DOT, then there is limited down ramp capability, because during the early morning solar hours, we have some of the thermal resources that are gradually shutting down, and solar resources are, start generating, and any lack of downward dispatch capability on those will create a higher failure probability for that balancing area in the down direction. Jimmy, can we move to the next slide? So as I mentioned before, 2 tests are important to have full EIM transfer capability. The first one was the flex ramp sufficiency test, and we saw the metric for the up and down direction. These next 2 set of charts are going to be about the capacity test. And as most of the participants are aware, ISO had several discussions about the bid range up capacity test framework. And it was decided that starting in June 2021, each EIM area would require to carry an additional capacity which would reflect the need for their net load uncertainty. And as expected, when we have additional capacity requirement for the test, there was a higher probability that we would see an increase in the test failures. So based on that information, as we can see, as we go into the summer months starting around June, there is an increase in the capacity test failures, mainly for 2 or 3 entities. And these capacity test failures have some correlation to the increase in the requirement because of the uncertainty. At the same time, summer months around the peak or around the net load peak, we have seen that there are tight supply conditions that is affecting some of the balancing areas. That is another reason for the capacity test failures. So I would say, there are few balancing areas that have seen a slightly higher capacity test failure. There are others who are, end up passing most of the capacity test hours. And just to give you a benchmark, you can see most of the areas have the test failures of less than 0.5%, and some entities do have a failure rate of around 2.5 to 3%, which is at the higher end of the failure. Let's go to the next slide, Jimmy. This is the slide that shows the performance for the bid range capacity down test. And as you know, general expectation is during the summer months, for most of the hours, each EIM area would have enough downward capacity. So there are very few down capacity test failures, and we have seen some handful of cases where EIM entities have less than 0.2 or 0.3% of down test failures, and that's an expected market outcome. I believe that's all I have for the EIM section. Jimmy, can we see if there are any questions before we move on?
Rahul. As a reminder, folks, please raise your hand virtually. I don't see any questions currently in the queue. I'll give you a couple of seconds before we move on to the next section. That was a lot of information. Appreciate that, Rahul.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I think, Jimmy, I can pass it to, I believe it's either Amber or Guillermo.
Thanks, Rahul. I believe Amber dialed in. I'm not sure if.
Hello, this is Amber. Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are, Amber.
Oh, perfect. Well, if we can move forward in the metrics, on the forecasting side, if there's any questions, feel free to walk through. We just put in the standard metrics that we have had in the months before on the forecasting side. There is some more detailed information, as you guys have seen in the June and July report as well. Overall, on the forecasting side, let's see, what slide is that one at as you're flipping. It is around, Jimmy. Let's scroll down. The last slides of this section, I want to say we're probably in the 40s. Mm-hmm. 52. All right, there we go. So the day-ahead load forecast, we saw improvements in the July and August accuracy numbers for the day-ahead forecast. As you guys remember, in 2020, the August and September increased bars were really smoke-driven. We had a lot of impacts into load forecasting in relation to smoke, and we have seen some of those impacts, of course, in August, but we're able to capture some of those smoke impacts during the August timeframe, and then September's numbers will be coming out in the coming months. Next slide. Day-ahead peak forecast, a very similar trend that we've seen in July. We had a little bit of increased error from previous years, but really the summer months are falling in the same space that we've seen before, right around the 2 to 2.5% range in both June, July, and August. Next slide. Our day-ahead wind forecast, we had a little bit of increased error in July, but then a reduction overall in August from 2020, but a little higher than 2020 or in 2019. I'm going to skip forward a little bit because I know a lot of these are really falling in line with what we've seen in the previous years as well. The one slide I want to skip to is the EIM area. So we go to 58. We did see some increased error, specifically within the Nevada area for July. I wanted to talk about that one a little bit. As you can see, that one stands out a little bit more than normal. Overall, we are still seeing increased error in the EIM footprint, just similar to what we've seen with the CAISO. COVID has an impact still into the 2021 time period. We've seen its impacts more in the summer of 2021 as you're kind of in the in-between ground of what load was there 2019 versus what we see now, not quite a 2020 load, but somewhere in between. We also know that this year in specifically for a lot of our EIM participants has been well above normal. So when you look at the historical climatological temperatures, you see that the PAC Northwest had a lot of heat in June, towards the end of June, hung into the beginning part of July, temperatures that they had never seen before. That, of course, is going to impact the load forecast accuracy as well. For Nevada specifically in July, as well as Arizona and some of the more desert Southwest EIM entities, this is the first year in a couple years that we've had a more active monsoon season. The monsoon rains come in and they can really drop temperatures and load very, very quickly. The models, luckily, are autoregressive in nature. They will catch up to it as the load is dropping off, but it takes about 20 minutes for it to kick in. So for July, we saw a little bit of an increase in the air for Nevada during the heat that was at the beginning part of July, and then some of the other days that are driving that air increase are the monsoon days that were more towards the middle and end of July. But overall, as you look through the EIM entities, we have added the ones that are there as well. It is very similar to what we've seen in 2020, and we've had a lot of heat throughout the footprint for the Western United States, and then we have had a more active monsoon pattern than we've seen in the last few years. So those two things are really contributed to the forecast area that you're seeing in addition to COVID. And that's really all I had on the forecasting update. If you guys have any questions, I'll pass it back to Jimmy. And if there's anything else that you would like to see within the forecasting section updates, there is more information in the summer reports that are out as well. Just let us know.
A lot, Amber. All right, not seeing any current questions either in the chat or in the queue. So not just specific to this section, folks, but any general questions over the market performance material generally before we move on to the policy section. Now would be the time for that. All right. Seeing or hearing none. Brad, I'm not sure if you're ready, but we are now at the policy update section.
I'm ready. Can everybody hear me?
Perfect, yes.
Okay, good morning. Why don't we move to the first slide? Okay, this is our updated 2021 annual plan. This is the same annual plan that we presented to the EIM governing body and the Board of Governors in an update we did this summer. The major changes to this are you'll see at the bottom. We put off a number of initiatives, the bottom three initiatives, to make room for the summer 2021 initiative that was a new initiative that we started at the beginning of the year to respond to the events of last summer, to be more prepared for this summer, and that resulted in us moving off a number of initiatives. And I believe we also dropped some initiatives or moved them to, or I should say, moved them to next year that we originally had on the annual plan. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, the Resource Adequacy Enhancements Initiative is looking at various changes to the ISO's resource adequacy rules. It's being conducted in 4 phases. The first phase is completed. The second phase, phase 2, is looking at changes to RA Resources must offer obligations and bid insertion rules. It's also looking at potential changes to the flexible resource adequacy rules. The phase 3 is looking at a number of issues. Primarily, the big issue is this UCAP, or unforced capacity proposal, for counting generation in RA based on outage rates. And then the phase 4 would be looking at a portfolio analysis where the RA fleet shown would be analyzed and to see if it actually meets the actual load needs. Next slide, please. So status: the phase 1 is completed. That was implemented this summer. Phase 2, we're planning to post the draft final proposal and the tariff language later this month, with the goal of getting that to the ISO board for a decision either December or January. And then the phase 3 is on a longer term track, and the 7th revised draft proposal is planned to be posted late December, the end of the year. The EIM governing body role, because of the new joint authority rules that were recently approved, potentially they would have advisory input as to the items that affect the real-time market. I believe that would only be the must-offer obligations, but that would be only if they decided to exert that advisory input to the board. Primarily, these are CAL-ISO BAA specific rules as they relate to resource adequacy requirements. California, or CAL-ISO resource adequacy requirements, I should say. Next slide, please. The Energy Storage Enhancements Initiative, it's looking at various changes to how our market optimizes dispatch and settles energy storage resources. There's people have brought up a number of potential impacts to storage with the real-time look-ahead or multi-interval optimization. This initiative is looking at those. We also committed to develop a market mechanism to replace the MSOC, or the minimum state of charge rules that we put in this summer, and we committed to sunsetting, and then looking at various other issues with storage. I won't read the rest of those. So the status of this is we had a workshop. We completed a workshop for stakeholders to present on their proposed solutions to issues. And then we recently had a market surveillance committee meeting on our proposal for the minimum state of charge replacement. I'd note that there was a number of concerns expressed with that proposal, the state of charge product, I believe it's called. So we're considering those concerns and those comments, and considering alternatives. Our plan is to enlist a number of academic experts on storage and have a workshop or a committee to review the storage rules and make recommendations. At this point, the target straw proposal is published in October. The straw proposal is targeted to be published in October. I think that will depend on the timing of the academic committee. We don't have a date for that yet, and the results of that, and what we're going to propose, whether we're going to stick with our existing proposal or look at alternatives. So we have some balls in the air related to the next step with the energy storage enhancements. Next slide, please. The external load forward scheduling rates process. This is an initiative we committed to at the conclusion of our summer enhancements initiative for this summer, which put in some relevant to this. It put in some rules for wheel through transactions. We committed to a process to explore enhancements to rules for wheeling transactions that would be more along the lines of what other BAAs do under OATS, where external entities can procure forward transmission. In our market, would it be procurement of forward transmission per se? It would be more high priority scheduling rights. In this, we got to carefully balance the need to preserve reliability in the CAISO BAA, reserve our transmission to serve our load, but while also acknowledging that California is an integral part of the Western transmission system. So we need to work out an equitable process that will serve CAISO's load, but also respect the reliability needs of other BAAs. We're planning a stakeholder workshop this afternoon, so tune in. And this would be an advisory role to the EIM governing body, as it doesn't affect the EIM market per se, but it does affect EIM participants to the extent they would have a need to wheel through the CAISO BAA. Next slide, please. The resource sufficiency evaluation enhancements. This is another initiative that came out of last summer's or last spring's summer 2021 enhancements initiative, where we committed to looking at further enhancements to the EIM resource sufficiency evaluation. The EIM governing body role on this initiative would now be a joint authority with the CAISO board for approving what we propose under the new rules. We posted a straw proposal back in August. We're just getting in comments. I believe it's around right now. It's yesterday or today, or maybe I'm off a day, but we're getting in comments about right now. Planning to post the draft final proposal October 6th, and then bring it to a joint EIM governing body and ISO board meeting in December. Did I say 2020? December 2021. Next slide, please. Western EIM sub-entity scheduling coordinator role. I just have this in the deck for completeness. It was approved by the EIM governing body yesterday, and then it'll be on the ISO board's consent agenda in their upcoming meeting. Next slide, please. The day-ahead market enhancements. This is examining a couple changes or proposing a couple changes to the day-ahead market. First, what we're terming the imbalance reserve product will reserve capacity that will be co-optimized in the integrated forward market along with energy and ancillary services to replace out-of-market actions our operators currently take in the following residual unit commitment process. The out-of-market actions are things like upward adjustments to the load forecast to reserve more capacity for uncertainty that might materialize in the real time, integrating the procurement of this capacity rather than using out-of-market actions in the integrated forward market should more efficiently procure this capacity, and it should also provide a needed market product that should, improve market performance. It's also changing the residual unit commitment process to provide for downward capacity should the CAISO load forecast be less than what the IFM clears at. We posted a revised proposal on July 21st. I should have added another bullet. We also discussed this at the recent MSC meeting. There was a number of issues brought up as well as questions. We're trying to, or we're currently in the process of developing proposals to address those issues. Once we have that finalized, we'll schedule an additional stakeholder workshop to discuss our proposals and the ideas with stakeholders. We don't have a date for that, but hopefully it'll be scheduled soon by the end of this month, hopefully. Currently, I think, or before we said this would be the November EM governing body and ISO board meetings. I don't think that's feasible at this point. We're listing here December, but that will be dependent on how the next workshop goes. Next slide, please. The extended day-ahead market. We suspended activity. We suspended the formal stakeholder activity, I should say, on this last or at the beginning of this year when we reprioritized to address the summer enhancements initiative. So we have had a number of stakeholder discussions, both with the California entities as well as the external entities. When the process was going on, the more formal stakeholder process was going on, there was quite a divergence of views. I think we've come to some common viewpoints on those, on the various issues, and we plan to restart this initiative coming up in the fourth quarter of this year. As far as the EM governing body role, we'd request that the ISO Board of Governors give the EM governing body joint approval authority for this initiative, as it's obviously closely related to the EIM. Next slide, please. Scarcity pricing initiative. Obviously, this initiative would look at enhancing our market scarcity pricing provisions for particularly for more efficient pricing during tight supply conditions. We've also said that if appropriate, we'd reconsider our system market power mitigation proposal that we developed. It's on hold for now because there are some concerns with the proposal, and we hadn't seen conditions that made it urgent to put in system market power mitigation. We're currently planning to start this initiative in the fourth quarter of 2021. This initiative is likely closely related to the storage enhancements initiative, and it's very closely related to some topics that are coming up into day-ahead market enhancements, more specifically, how we procure this balanced reserves in the day-ahead market. So we're also looking at this initiative in light of storage and day-ahead market enhancements, and considering how we, depending on the solutions that we're looking at in the day-ahead market enhancements and the storage, we may need to integrate this somehow into those initiatives rather than having it as a separate initiative. But we haven't finalized any of those plans. Next page, please, or this might be it. Yeah, so I'll open it up for questions.
Brad. The additional reminder, folks, please raise the raise hand icon for any questions. I don't see anything as of yet. One chat question from Stephen Greenleaf asking, is the CAISO considering taking up a policy initiative to reform its deliverability analysis in light of the anticipated long-term RA reform?
I'd have to get back to you on that. There are some potential transmission planning related initiatives that we're looking at that we'll likely propose for the policy roadmap, I believe, for next year. But I'd have to get back to you on the deliverability and RA. I'm not familiar with that.
Thanks, Brad. I don't see any further questions, so thank you very much, Brad and everyone else. Next section is the release plan update provided by Trang. If you're ready, Trang. Operator, if you can unmute Trang's line.
Hear me? I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Good morning. This is Trang Vo from the Strategic Initiative Management Division of the ISO, and for the release plan update. So let's go to the first slide. All right. So as usual, we give a summary of the training offerings, and at a high level, the focus has been on the fall release training, and all of the fall release training sessions have been complete with the exception of one that's upcoming. The short long start definitions training session is the remainder for the fall, and that is TBD, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. And then another implementation that we have for this year with the fall and then activation on January 1st is variable O&M. And you do see that there's a training on October 14th for that initiative that is still planned for that time. So we can go on to the next slide, Jimmy. All right, and this is a reminder again for the offerings that are on the Learning Center. And as far as the new modules, you'll see that we recently had our fall sessions for real-time settlement review, hybrid resources 2A, and ESDR phase 4 at the end of August. And those are available, the recordings and the presentations, on the Learning Center. So please do refer to that for any supporting information for the market simulation, as well as to prepare for production implementation. So let's move on. All right. So here you'll see the release plan summary for 2021. The list is getting smaller as we've wrapped up our summer release, and that has been removed. So let's take a look at what's remaining for independent and fall for 2021. For independent items, we do have ADS updates for AS tests, and you'll see a new item here for data retention. It's we're going to resurrect the discussions that we've had since the last fall release about data retention, and So we're happy to reintroduce that topic. For the independent items, the rest remains the same from the last rep presentation. So we have EIM enhancements, phase 2, variable O&M, OSI enhancements, and then the REMS UI framework upgrade. For fall 2021, we do have the same stable list of 6 initiatives that are in scope for fall, but we do have some updates there that we wanted to provide. So I'll go more into that once we get to that section, but the overall scope of the release is the same. So we can move on to the next slide, Jimmy. All right. So here you'll see the 2022 release items. You'll see the EIM implementations for spring 2022 in March and April. You'll also see the software implementations for spring 2022 activating May 1st. Those are the same list for FRP deliverability, the base schedule submission deadline, phase 2, which is the T40, T30 timeline change, and then hybrid resources phase 2B. For fall 2022, again, this list is tentative, pending policy and planning developments, and so we'll continue to work closely with our policy team to provide the latest implementation details as we get through that process and further into implementation. All right. So let's move on, Jimmy. I'll go through the independent items and then I'll stop for questions along the way. So we'll go on to the ADS updates in the next slide, Jimmy. All right. So for AS tests, there are some updates here. So again, we have completed the testing with our ADS users of the IS test functionality for spin and non-spin. We do have a notice that's queued up that you should receive later this week or next week to specify and clarify here that once we activate AS tests, just as a reminder, operators will no longer receive phone calls for unannounced AS tests. That's going to be automated in ADS, and the ISO still has the phone call option as a backup, but again, that process will change. And for operating procedure 5370, we have that draft ready to go, and once it's posted, it'll be available under the rules and operating procedures. You'll note that it's still accurate that the activation date has not been finalized yet, and we are committed to providing a customer notice at least a couple of days prior to activating this feature in production. Our plan is still the middle of September to activate AS tests, and as I mentioned before, you'll receive a notice within the next few days to announce the final activation date of that. All right. So I'll move forward to the next ADS update, and then I'll stop for questions after that. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so ADS data retention. So this is, again, a topic we've discussed with the fall 2020 release, and then we wanted to bring that back now that we've replaced the ADS product, and we've been using the new ADS for some time. So this gives you some history of the plans for ADS data retention. Again, our first proposal was to keep data for 30 days. And then based on the feedback, it was expanded to 90 days of data retention. And we were planning to enforce that earlier, but decided to postpone the enforcement of the data retention period to allow for more focus on the ADS transition. So now that we've transitioned to ADS, we want to continue to pursue this data retention. So our first phase will be to enforce the data retention for 90 days, meaning that data after 90 days will not be available. And that is planned for October of this year. You're going to, ADS users will start to see additional customer notices for this, and the action that we're recommending even at this time is to start downloading any of the data, exporting any of the data in ADS that you may need in preparation of this. And then again, we'll continue to send reminders of the removal of that data past 90 days starting in October. And then our next step after the October timeframe of the 90 days retention is then to reduce the retention even further to 30 days. So this will now be a standing agenda item in the TUG and the RUG as we go through this process. So with the ADS updates, I'll stop here for any questions. All right, and Jimmy, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't see anything in the chat, and Mark, I just want to confirm with you there's no questions in the queue. Just as a reminder, folks, you can raise your hand by pushing the #2 if you dialed in only.
We have no questions at this time.
All right, great. So I'll move forward through the rest of the independent items, and then we'll go stop for questions after that. So for EIM Enhancements 2021 Phase 2, this type of effort should start to look familiar. And again, it's a set of enhancements that will coordinate closely via the EIM biweekly calls. But just from an overall perspective, if you go to the next slide, Jimmy. And then one more. We'll go to the milestones here. So again, the EIM enhancements is a set of enhancements that will continue to implement and coordinate with the EIM entities. And again, these will move on to production as they are ready, as each of the enhancements becomes ready. And our intent is to have all of the features active in production by December 1st. So that continues to track well. So we'll go on to the next section. All right. So variable O&M, no changes to scope here. So we can move on to the next slide. And then one more. All right. So in terms of milestones here, again, our negotiations for Phase 1 take priority, of course, and then we'll commit to having those negotiations complete by January 1st. And then we are also working through the Phase 2 negotiations and trying to get those done as soon as possible, but without a guarantee that those will be done before January 1st. Our next milestone, as noted before, is going to be the external training on October 14th. And the implementation will be with the fall for most of the changes, and then the effective date will be January 1st. So this one continues to track well towards that. So we can go on to the next set. All right. We have our OSI enhancements, which again is new on the release planning area for this year, but you should see these efforts in the following years too. Again, a collection of enhancements that we have that will move forward individually and will be communicated with users as each becomes ready. So if we go to the next slide, we do have some updates on what's available in map stage as well as production. So you'll see here the list of upcoming enhancements by system and description. So you see that we have a couple that are planned for September for DRS and market, and then for October we have MRIS and market enhancements, and then November ADS and market. What we have that's in progress right now or recently completed is MRIS. We do have the changes for all monitoring data available in map stage as of August 30th. The changes went in, and then we also had a training documentation that's available as well. So we have the date of the 7th as the official start of that testing to align with when the training information was provided. For OMS, we had 2 items that went to production this week, so those will move down to be completed. And then we have still a few items for Sierra and Oasis that we're working through the planning phases of, and we'll provide more information on the availability of those. So we can go on to the next slide. All right, I think this may be one of the final ones in independent. So we've had the RIMS UI framework upgrade come to the RUG for some time, and we did review our production readiness for this upgrade yesterday, and we have confirmation that we're ready to go. And so you'll see a notice likely today or tomorrow that will announce the RIMS UI framework upgrade that will happen on Monday, September 13th between 1 and 4. So this is will likely be the last time you see this update there. So stay tuned to those announcements for RIMS, but that is on track for Monday at this point. All right, and then Jamie, can you go one more slide? I just want to confirm we're at the end. All right, so that's the end of the independent section. So I'll open it up here for any questions on the independent efforts before we go to the fall.
Sure. Give folks a minute or two, or sorry, a second or two for any questions. I don't see anything.
All right. So let's move on to the next slide for fall. All right. So here we have, as usual, the matrix for the fall release overview. So I want to give some high-level updates, and let's start. So for the BRSs, those are stable and available. Config guides are out. The settlements config guides are out there on the release planning page. All of the tech specs that were anticipated for fall are published, and all the markets and scenarios are also published. So let's talk about the tariff. So for the tariff, the items that remain are really just one. So the updates here you'll see is that for ESDR, we did file for an activation no later than December 1st, and that was filed on August 27th. For hybrid resources, we filed yesterday an amendment there for an activation no later than December 1st as well. So that is available as of yesterday on the release, on the public website under regulatory filings. So please refer to the hybrid resources new filing at this point. For EIM base schedule, submitting base schedule below PMIN, again, we refiled on August 3rd and are still at this point just waiting for FERC approval. Real-time settlement review was already approved previously with phase 1. And then for intertie shadow pricing, no tariff filing there. For short, long start definitions, you'll see that this was planned by the end of August, but now is TBD. And then, so at this point for short, long start, I wanted to update here that we internally have decided to take this back to the board, and so with that, we wanted to wait until after to file the tariff after the board review, and so that's why you see a tariff filing as TBD. So if you'll read a little further into that, you'll know that since the tariff is not filed yet, our production activation for 11.1 is no longer on track for short long start. So wanted to announce at this point that the short long start definitions will move, the activation will move past November 1st. And in terms of the market simulation, we are still continuing with the testing of the scope that was published previously, and are considering continuing with the market simulation as is, with, again, the production activation still TBD, but it will be after November 1st. Okay. So let me go through the rest of the milestones here, and then we can go to the individual projects. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. And we go to the milestone table here. Thank you. All right. So for ESDR here, some updates are that again we filed the tariff, and then we delivered the external training, which is available. So we do see for ESDR 4, this is our anchor project for the fall, and there's a lot of interest in this. We know, and we've communicated before, that we do see a risk in the schedule due to, again, impacts from the summer release. And we're continuing to work with the vendor and the project team to make up the delay in the schedule to still shoot for the activation November 1st. At this point, again, we've filed for an activation no later than December 1st to give us the flexibility, and at this point are still confirming the feasibility of the production activation date on November 1st. For market simulation, if those of you are staying tuned to that, will know that we had targeted the market simulation to begin on September 21st, which already is later within the fall market sim window. And at this point, that risk in the schedule also impacts market simulation, so we're still evaluating the readiness and feasibility of starting the market sim at that time on September 21st. What we can commit to for ESDR is that we will have a 2-week market simulation for ESDR before the production activation, but the exact dates of the market simulation as well as the production activation still need to be verified, and so we're continuing to prioritize the planning and schedule review of this effort to be able to provide more clarity here. So I'll stop here on ESDR and see if there's any specific questions about the timeline.
Oh, excuse me, sorry. Looks like we do not still have any questions in the queue.
All right, then let's go forward to the hybrid resources milestone table. Can go, I think, a couple more slides. All right. So for hybrid resources right now, again, the update is that the tariff was filed yesterday for an activation no later than December 1st. And due to the filing after April, you'll know that that doesn't allow for the full 60 days prior to the November 1st activation. So this activation will likely be no earlier than November 9th, and then no later than December 1st is what we're planning. And that's the update there. So any questions on hybrid resources and expectations there? All right, let's move on to the next milestone table.
Thanks, Trey. I think we do have one question in the queue, it looks like, at least on my end. Here, it's on your end too.
Caller, your line is unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Chen Yu from PG&E. Hi, Trey. I do have 3 questions. Looks like when I do pound 2, it doesn't seem like your operator able to see that it's a question. So one question, when you review the short loan definition, the delay in the filing and going back to the board. So do you have a high-level summary as what is being different than the original scope? And so we can understand what is going on there?
Yeah, sure. So give me 1 second here. You know what, Chanyu, would you mind if we waited till we got to short long start for that one, and then I'll answer that question, okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I do have a question for the support timeline. So when you mentioned the 2 weeks of testing before going live, is that just 2 weeks test execution? For example, if you're starting, I don't know, September 21st, and the test execution can last until October 5th, then we also have allowed settlement validation time, because understand the settlement will say if it's the 5th, the settlement probably will not be published until October 12 or something. So would there be support for the settlement validation?
Yes, that's a great question too. And so when we commit to the 2-week market simulation that will occur in map stage, after the market simulation, the environment will remain open outside of maintenance. So the statements that are available there, as well as any other report and data, will remain available, and will continue to support the validation of the market simulation results for ESDR even past the 2-week market sim period. So we do not plan on stopping support, and we'll continue to address any questions about those results of the ESDR 4 market simulation after the 2 weeks as well.
Sounds good. And then, so this is the initial plan. We'll say when we come to very close to the 2 weeks period and we find problems, and then CAISO will need time to resolve those issues. So we expect the market sim will continue, and CAISO team will continue to support the market sim execution at that point.
Yeah, that's correct. A successful market simulation is a criteria for us to be ready to go live in production. And so it is still our priority at that time to work with our market participants to demonstrate success for that market simulation.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. I kind of forget whether you covered the ESDR 4 when you ask for FERC. Is that asked before December 1 or asked by November 1 for ESDR 4?
Thank you. Yeah, we filed on August 27th the amendment that to allow us to activate no later than December 1st. So we do plan on going as soon as possible to activate as soon as possible. Our initial target is, of course, November 1, and that remains our target. But again, we'll have to work through some of the schedule risk in order to still be able to achieve that, and that's what we're validating. But we did file by December 1st.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then again, we'll cover short, long start a little bit later on in the presentation, and I'll make sure I address that question then. All right. Thank you, Chenyu. Okay, so let's move forward to the next milestone table then, please. Okay. Base schedule submission deadline. Again, submission of the base schedule below PMIN. We are just pending the FERC approval for this, and then we'll proceed with the production activation on November 1st. So this one is tracking well towards that. So we can go to the next milestone table, please. All right, real-time settlement review. We are getting ready to begin the market simulation for this one, and then after that, and again, this will be the structured market simulation, and then after that, we have the production activation tracking towards November 1st. All right, and then we can go on to the next, and I believe it's okay. All right, so for intertie shadow pricing resolution, so what's coming up here is going to be external training, but again, it's NA for external training, but you should expect a training communication about this. So we won't have a session for external training, so this is accurate where it says NA, but we still will be sending communication about what to expect for once this is implemented. And the unstructured market simulation, we have details in the market simulation call for that, and that one, the connectivity is planned for at least the OASIS component this week, and then the unstructured to start later on this month, and then again the production activation November 1st. All right, and then we can move on to, I believe, short, long start is going to be our last milestone table, so let's go there. All right, so there's some updates here. So what you'll notice when in terms of the board is that the Board of Governors approval was NA, so we did not take it back to the board, we did not take it to the board before. And at this point, due to the impact of the changes, I think that we, and to provide more awareness and give an opportunity for feedback, we do want to bring this to the board, not bring it back, but just bring it for the initial presentation before we file. So in terms of the question about what's changed from the initial presentation versus this going back to the board, I should clarify that this hasn't gone to the board before. And the BRS that's published there with the scope from June is still valid, and we again just want to bring this to the board just for more visibility of the effort and to give opportunity for those impacted to provide any feedback. Okay. So then again, because we intend to bring this back to the board, we don't want to file yet, just in case there are any clarifications that come from any comments received at the board and that review. So the tariff filing is TBD. And then also in the same situation, if some of the external training is still TBD, we wanted to put that on hold to, again, just allow us an opportunity to make any changes if necessary, if the board review does result in any adjustments to this effort. Okay. But as far as the scope, it is the same that's published out there at this time. And again, the additional TBDs for tariffs and training are just based on giving us an opportunity to absorb any of the any adjustments that may come from that board review. All right, so I'll stop here for any questions on short, long, start, or any of the other fall efforts. All right. Then,
thanks for questions again.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so then let's go on to the spring release, and I'll just cover this really quickly. So if we go to the next one, I would just wanted to note here for spring 2022 for the EIM integrations, we are gearing up to start the market simulations for our, the Avista BPA in Tacoma next month, and we have all the EIMs at least connecting or participating and preparing for a market simulation in our map stage environment. And then, so that's going to be the next big activity that's happening, and we'll continue to support our any of our market simulation efforts along with the EIM market simulation efforts. And then for the rest of the items, there's not a lot of change in FRP deliverability and hybrid 2B and the EIM base schedule phase 2. So we continue to focus on getting through the fall, and then we will have additional planning on the implementation of the spring 2022 software projects, and we'll notify folks at the REG when there are updates. But currently, there's no change to those slides. So I'll stop here for any final questions on the release plan.
Thanks. Not seeing any more questions. As another reminder, folks, you can raise your hand by the virtual icon or push #2 only if you dialed in by phone.
All right, then I'll hand it back over to you, Jimmy.
Thanks so much, Trang. As mentioned, this was recorded, folks, so we appreciate everyone listening in, and thank you so much to the presenters and everyone else for listening in today. We hope this was informative. As mentioned, please check out our Energy Matters blog, which is available on the About section on the CAISO homepage. And the recording for the session will be available in the next couple of business days, so please look out for that as well with the other meeting material. And just opening up now for just one final call for questions before we conclude for today. So I'm not sure, Marco, if you're seeing anything in the queue.
We have no questions at this time.
Great. Well, thanks so much again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.